Hello, it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I am going to be sharing with you my reaction and ranking to the Novelette category in the Hugo Awards. So without further ado, let's get talking about some novelettes. So I actually thought that this year's Novelette category was pretty strong. I did not have a very strong, vehement, visceral annoyance or dislike to any of the stories. So that is something, at least. And I feel like the strongest stories really spoke to me. I don't know if it's because of things that I'm currently working out and going through myself in my personal life right now. So some of these stories hit really hard. So I'm just going to talk you through my reactions and my rankings from my least favorite to my absolute favorite. And once again, this video is not meant to influence anyone else's voting. These are just my opinions, and these are for the purpose of sharing my thoughts and sort of comparing and contrasting with other enthusiasts who are following the Hugo Awards. With that said, let's start with the first story, which is the Unseelie Brothers Ltd by Fran Wilde. This one was really opulent. The vibe of the whole fashion world and design and the sort of cruelty and this sort of diminishing of others' works that is rampant in the fashion world and in clothing manufacturing in general, is really something that I know a lot about from my previous profession as a tailor seamstress. So this idea of specifically looking at women as designers and as creators of these garments and how they have been overshadowed by their male counterparts is really interesting. There's also this this fairy tale quality of it, of people being spirited away into other worlds and other dimensions, where this sort of shop that appears in random places is involved in that. And I thought that it is very interesting. However, all in all, I thought that it was the execution was a little hollow. The bones were there. There were lots of interesting ideas, but I felt like it was all very surface level, and I didn't feel very connected to the characters. I was just kind of going with the flow and not really caring about what happens. And also the ending was kind of everyone sort of got to have their cake and eat it too, which to me is always a little annoying. I'm always I'm always someone who likes consequences and who likes something major has to change for the character. Something has to really they have to be some sacrifice has to be made. It doesn't have to be super major, but I feel like if the character is the exact same person from start to finish, I just feel there's no point to the actual story. So that is why Unseelie Brothers Ltd is my least favorite story. And then fifth on my list is Bots of the Lost Ark by Suzanne Palmer. This novelette is a sort of standalone sequel to another story they wrote a couple years ago. I haven't read that story, and I felt that not having the context of that previous story did not in fact impede my reading and my enjoyment in any way. So that's good. This story definitely stands on its own, even though it does reference things from that previous story. This story also has the unfortunate role of being lower on the rankings because it is not a bad story, but all the subsequent stories that I read were just better and more impactful for me. So this was just fine. It was funny. It's sort of tries to discuss the idea of what is humanity and what sort of separates autonomous intelligence from humanity. And there's also this sort of found family aspect of this ship protecting this one bot that has been a rebel in the past and stuff. So there are elements that I really enjoyed. However, there were other stories that really hit me hard. So that is why the bots of the Lost Ark didn't really get a higher ranking. Next on my list is O2 Arena by Oghenechovwe Donald Ekpeki. This is a story that is climate fiction. It is part tragedy, part dystopian, part almost hopeful in a very gruesome way, because the way the story ends, it leaves the doors open to a kind of cataclysmic change in power structures, because people are waking up to this idea that they can resist and they can rebuild the world into something better. I thought that there were some really interesting ideas here. What I didn't necessarily like was the main character's sort of character voice. I thought that he was sort of very preachy is the wrong way. He was not preachy, but he, like, the way he was kind of like espousing these sorts of thoughts about, for example, women's rights and stuff, it felt very like, I don't know, sort of male feministy to me, which is sometimes like aggravating to me. But other than that, I thought that there were some really interesting ideas and concepts. There's this whole idea of like oxygen itself being like a form of currency, and people have to like wear these oxygen masks everywhere they go, because the climate is so like toxic and damaged, and the atmosphere is so damaged that people can't breathe air properly. So there's this idea of like class and wealth playing into who gets to even live and who gets to have proper treatment, which is it's also doing in real life right now as well in certain places, in most places. But this story wants to kind of highlight that and makes it even like more egregious and sort of over the top, even though it is based in like actual real lived experiences. So I thought that it was interesting. I thought that it had some really cool world building things, and it also had a lot of important things to say, but comparing and contrasting to other stories, it wasn't my favorite. And now, the top 3 stories. Now we're getting to the stories that sort of very personally affected me in like heart-shattering ways, starting with That Story Isn't the Story by John Wiswell. This is basically all about like leaving a toxic relationship, leaving a toxic living situation, and also how hard it is to leave and how hard it is to accept that you are slowly getting over it, you are slowly healing, and how there's this how sometimes you revert back to those toxic behavior patterns that you have learned in that previous environment, and how traumatizing like it can be to escape that situation and facing the unknown, and how hard it is to like trust people even when they are trying to create a safe space for you. I thought that this story was really cool, and there were some pacing issues, and I feel like I personally prefer when a lot of like media gets alluded to and not specifically named. For example, this features Terraria, the video game, and other like media franchises by name, and I usually prefer when authors kind of allude to those specific medias but don't necessarily name them. That way the story doesn't age itself out in a couple of years. So that's just my personal pet peeve, but I really enjoyed this story, and it has some like interesting like minor horror elements, and the magical element is kind of like, is this a real magical element, or is this a sort of like a metaphor? So it's like there's a lot of like left for the reader to interpret, which I really like. And then I liked a Catherynne and Valente story. which is weird because I have read Palimpsest, which is one of my favorite books. I really like it. But after Palimpsest, basically none of Catherynne and Valente's stories have ever worked for me. And now I've read a story by Catherynne and Valente that I really liked, and that is L'Esprit de l'Escalier. And it is like, it hits way too close to home right now. This whole story is shattering. I don't like to use the word something broke me, but this kind of broke me because it made me look inside and it made me face some really uncomfortable truths about my own of my own real lived experiences. This is basically about a relationship that is coming apart. It has already come apart. They have tried again, and now it is fully ending. And there's this idea of someone sort of putting a person on a pedestal and having the wrong expectations and sort of the wrong idea of the person to begin with. And this idea of projecting that ideal that they have onto another person who may not want to be looked at that way or treated that way. And there's also some real interesting metaphorical discussion about being in a relationship with a disabled person. And sort of this idea of when you kind of start to vilify the person who is disabled because of the sacrifices that you have to make to take care of them. However, they may not want to be coddled in that way. I just thought that there were so many interesting things about the story, and it definitely hit very close to home for me. And wasn't my favorite though, but it was close. It was close. I really liked this story. And I wouldn't mind if it won the Hugo for Best Novelette, but my favorite it is not. And my favorite story is Colors of the Immortal Palette by Caroline and Yoachim. And this story has all the things. It is alternative history. It has magical, fantastical elements. It is exploring humanity and otherness and sort of this Orientalism. It makes you dive into this deep Wikipedia and history book rabbit holes to find out about all of the art movements and references that are being made. So there are so many things layered on top of each other that sort of make the story more complex than it seems on the surface. And I really liked it. I thought that the fact that it is grounded in art movements and art history, and each scene that is depicted takes place in a new historical era that also had its own specific art movement, makes my heart very happy as a person who really likes art and also like really likes art history. And and also the story just taught me something new about various art movements and artists that I did not know before. And I'm thinking that is such a fantastic thing, a story that can make you not only empathize with another person for their struggles, but also teach you something new that is not related to that struggle. I think it's very powerful. And it was just beautifully written. I really liked the authorial and the character voice. And I just liked this character exploration because this character starts out very ambitious and almost kind of touchy and self-absorbed, almost like entitled, and you see them sort of grow out, and you see them grow up as a person and see them find their own worth and find their own like sort of self-esteem in a way, and it's like wonderful. I really like this story, and I would definitely recommend you read it if you haven't, because it was delightful. I loved it. And there you have it. Those were my thoughts on all of the novelettes in the Novelette category for the Hugo Awards. Tell me in the comments, have you read any of these stories and what was your favorite? And once again, leave me a rocket ship emoji down in the comments so that I know that you were here, because that is the Hugo Award symbol. And I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!